Hello and welcome to this FTP Extra. Just a reminder that the FTP Extras that we put out occasionally, they fall outside of our sailing log. So if you've been following our sailing series, this is actually recorded more in real time, whereas the sailing series is some weeks behind. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see we've broken them out into separate playlists. We've got FTP Extras and our sailing log.
We have indeed. And since the last extra we did on the engine, we wanted to do an update. That's what this is all about. So firstly, we want to say thank you for the overwhelming amount of support we have received from around the world. Thank you very, very much for taking an interest in our little problem here. We've received links to spare parts, links to new engines, links to old engines, and tremendous amount of tips and advice from all of you. So really just wanted to start off by saying thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And of course this situation is not something we're taking lightly. So we've looked at everyone's comments and we've considered every single option. And we've broken it down really into four possible options. The first one would be to recondition the head. The second option is to look at replacing our old engine with another similar engine or a reconditioned engine. Third option, which was a very popular comment, was to look at an electric or hybrid engine. And then the fourth option is to just plump for a new engine. And we're also going to be talking just briefly about batteries as well. So to help put this in context, I think it's important that we look at our situation, which is going to have some kind of bearing on what decision we eventually go for.
We've been living aboard Esper for 10 years and we spend most of our time at anchor. We've crossed a number of seas and plan to do so again soon. But right now we're cruising in between anchorages, reefs and rocks. Sometimes the weather can get hairy, and in the past we've had to run our engine for hours at a time in order to get ourselves out of predicaments.
We have cruised and we plan to cruise to more remote places. And sometimes we end up in situations and locations which are many hundreds of miles from human habitation. So this alone is going to have an impact on getting parts and resourcing mechanics and other availabilities.
We love our technology and we run laptops, smartphones, all kinds of technology on the boat throughout the day, not least cameras and drones need charging.
So we put high demands on our battery bank, and we don't just do day sails, we're often out for many weeks at a time. So we're not always returning at the end of the day to plug back into the mains grid. It's worth emphasising that despite not wanting to admit it, we do rely on the engine. In fact, the engine is pretty much at the heart of Esper and is as important as the sails. And also, let's face it, in the last 10 years we've been to some rather remote locations that simply wouldn't have been possible without the engine.
Yes, so with this in mind, let's have a look at the different options available.
Recondition the head. Buy a reconditioned engine. Install a new electric or hybrid engine, or install a new diesel engine.
So a number of people recommended that we recondition the head, and here are some of the messages we received. Michael Zietlow said, in the US, aluminium heads are repaired by heating up with a torch, grinding out the corroded spots, refilling the pits with a heli-arc welder, and sanding it all smooth again.
Sean Sim suggested that the head needs to be skimmed.
Ali head, clean and weld it up, far cheaper than new, suggested Tony Paul.
Steve Hock agreed and said if it's just a cracked head, perhaps an expert aluminium welder could patch it.
And Tim Donaghy wrote, you're in the place of cheap labour, surely there's a back alley machine shop there who can weld and machine that head for some crazy low price. So we discussed that last option with our mechanic here, and he was of the same opinion as us, that the aluminium head is so badly corroded that even if we were able to mend it, it probably wouldn't last very long.
Take a look at the footage. A workshop would have a hard time getting into the structure of the head without removing a large part of its integrity. In order to build up the corroded parts, we'd first have to blast away the old corrosion, and that wouldn't leave much left to work on. So even if we were to go down this route, how happy would we be mounting back a repaired head and sailing for the next however many years that we plan to sail for? It's basically an unknown quantity, and it's just not something we're prepared to risk.
The advantages of finding another reconditioned Perkins Prima M60 are obvious. It's a simple plug and play. Put it in and off you go. No having to worry about engine mounts, no worry about what's got to fit what.
Yeah, the gearbox ratio would be the same, I guess. And of course, we wouldn't have to worry about matching imperial parts with metric parts. It's literally just plug it in and away you go.
So it does sound like a really viable option.
First, we have to find a match. A couple of viewers pointed to an engine sitting in the UK that was a match. The problem? We don't know its history. We have no idea what condition the engine is in, and exactly how corroded is that head. By putting in a recon engine, we A, inherit the same problems as our current engine, and B, risk it breaking down due to some other age-related issue. Does it come with a warranty? And what happens in the event of a breakdown?
Furthermore, we did contact the UK vendor and to date have still had no reply.
A couple of people did suggest fitting like for like. After all, fitting a new engine would mean different measurements, dimensions, and maybe even gearbox ratio too. But does that mean that when we're long and gone and dead and buried and Esper continues to be sailed by her new owners, that she will forever have to be fitted with a Perkins Prima M60? Let's not forget these engines were made in the 80s. They were fitted in the Austin Montego, which some of our UK viewers will probably remember from the dim and distant past. They stopped making them in the early 90s. So by getting hold of an old engine, we could be opening a can of worms.
Yeah, and of course there's the matter of cost. A reconditioned engine done properly is an expensive item. Here is a really great quote from Uncle Muir from our YouTube channel.
A rebuilt engine can mean many different things to different people. Mine means what isn't replaced, block rods and crankshaft are machined. Pistons can sometimes be oversized and the bore machined or stock-sized pistons corrected with new sleeves, new camshaft and followers, valves, springs, new or refurbished head and injection pump rebuilt also. That is a great expense if done correctly. Many try to shortcut the process, but by the time you have a problem, you may be far away or in a country where you will have no recourse.
And here's another quote from YouTube, this time from Darren J2.
You may want to think long and hard about replacing with new. I had a gearbox fail on the engine and then the engine died. That was rebuilt and labour ate up most of the cost. Then the starter went, more cost. Then the fuel pump died, again more cost. I was fighting fire with the repairs. Had I foreseen what was going to happen, I could have had a brand new engine, gearbox and ancillaries for considerably less money than stripping the old, replacing and rebuilding, and then waiting for the next weakest link in the chain to break. Our sailing friend Sam said something similar about his Perkins engine. He claimed to have spent so much on repairs, he would have been better off buying a new engine.
And when we did the sums and we added them up properly, a whole new reconditioned engine was coming in at more than half the cost of a new engine. One of the more controversial options that was suggested by a number of people is the hybrid or an electric engine. Here's a great quote from Alan Helton.
I sail in one of these Hunter hybrids on the Chesapeake. It has a Volvo generator, and whenever the batteries get to 20%, it kicks in, recharges the batteries for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then you can go for a couple more hours before the generator has to kick in again. My understanding is that you could do that indefinitely as long as you have fuel. So the only difference is that while the engine would run constantly on a standard diesel, on a hybrid for extended motor cruising the generator would only be on for half the time. Also, when the motor is not on, the water turning over the prop turns the electric motor on the boat into a generator to charge the batteries. While the generator is on, it powers the motor if it's running and charges the batteries at the same time. In general, electric motors with only one moving part are extremely durable. Of course, you would still be dependent on the diesel generator for rapid charging, so diesel would still be the weak link in the chain. However, if you did lose your generator, wind, solar and the prop generator could at least give you enough electricity to manoeuvre into a slip if your generator did go.
So firstly, let's have a very quick look at what an electric hybrid engine offers us on paper. It's quiet, it's small, it offers great torque.
Yep, it can run off lithium batteries or thin plate pure lead acid, which are a variant of AGM, which can be discharged right down to 15%. And of course the upshot of all this is that your diesel consumption is massively reduced. A serial hybrid system uses a large electric engine to cope with most of the propulsion and a large generator to recharge, whereas a parallel system uses a diesel engine to cope with heavier demands and reverts back to a smaller electric engine to manage the smaller manoeuvres.
There's a comprehensive report in Practical Boat Owner magazine written by boat maintenance guru Nigel Calder, who spent a considerable amount of time examining the efficiency of these systems. It's pretty technical, so without going into too much detail, he concludes by saying that the main issue is regeneration of energy whilst at sea, essentially wind and solar.
In demanding situations, or rather situations where you're having to move faster than just slow speed manoeuvring in a marina, the energy demands are considerable for both recharging and for propulsion. So in a serial hybrid situation, this would mean that the generator would have to kick in frequently.
In Calder's tests, he claimed to charge 4 days' worth of domestic power in 15 minutes through the generator. But the setup costs put this way outside of our budget. He states that there are design compromises to the generator that would make it prohibitively expensive in the real world, and concludes that currently only engines that are 100 horsepower or more break the efficiency curve.
For us, there are some major issues with electric engine propulsion, so in no particular order, let's just look at these in turn.
1. The range. One concern is the range an electric engine can supply. In one case study where a boat owner installed a 7 kilowatt system, the range was up to 20 miles at 3 knots or 10 miles at 5 knots. This is fine for a bit of small coastal hopping or sailing on a lake, but we cover a lot of miles over periods of many days. Adding in our domestic electrical consumption, the batteries would be deeply discharged and then recharged so frequently the life cycle of the battery would be diminished.
2. The cost. In order to match the battery capacity required to not only power the engine but supply us with our high demand domestic requirements, we are looking at a new engine, a large bank of fast charging batteries and a generator to charge them all. There is no cost advantage. In fact, we'd end up outlaying a lot more.
3. Parts and availability. Electric engines or hybrids require parts that are not yet readily available. When the brushes go on the engine, can I expect to find replacement parts off the west coast of Indonesia? When the control box between the engine and the batteries go, can I find a replacement whilst anchored off an island in the Maldives?
We applaud those people experimenting with electric and hybrid engines, and I think if we were starting from scratch, we'd certainly look at this more seriously. Unfortunately, currently with our budgetary constraints and our power requirements, it's not a realistic option.
Here is a considered response from Norman B.
Sailing Uma have a vision of using their cruiser differently to your profile. In no wind conditions, their declared intent is to wait, a valid concept in those terms. For Esper, I cannot see there will ever be a practical, affordable and viable electric propulsion option.
Norman B. mentions Sailing Uma, a channel that we support and follow and for whom we have a great deal of respect.
But as permanent liveaboards living off the grid and visiting remote places, we just don't feel that a hybrid system is a viable and realistic option at the moment. We are positive, however, that hybrids are the engine of boating for the future.
Esper and her engine are approaching 30. She's clocked up thousands of miles from the UK to Thailand. But the thing is, we want to sail for another 30 years if we can, and could we do that with anything other than a new engine?
A new engine comes with a number of warranties, and not just those that are written on paper. Essentially, we'd be buying peace of mind. We can customise her to our specification, and providing we look after her, she should provide many thousands of hours of trouble-free motoring. So for us, a new diesel engine is the obvious choice.
Diesel engines have been around a long time and are established technology. They're a known quantity.
Perhaps our biggest concern was what happens when something goes wrong. A simple diesel engine is easy to fix. Take, for example, our current situation. Any issues with an electric motor or specialist batteries would be difficult to deal with in the north of Phuket, Thailand. Importing is expensive, and yet there are diesel mechanics all over the world with easy access to parts.
Despite the outlay, the cost of a diesel engine, the fuel it consumes and the batteries required to store the energy is relatively low in the long run. Parts are also cheap, providing the engine is made from off-the-shelf components.
A diesel engine, if maintained properly, should last 30 years or more. So the engine we've been looking at is the Beta, and we posted this up on our Facebook page and received these positive comments.
Since we've been talking about charging systems, it's worth briefly discussing our battery requirements.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of changes in battery technology over the last few years, from AGMs to lithium, and they all have their own advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages often cited with traditional flooded lead acid is their maintenance.
For the last 5 years, however, we've been using 6-volt golf cart batteries arranged in series. It's the preferred setup for John C. Payne, author of the Marine Electrical and Electronics Bible, and an established solution among many liverboards. For us, the only maintenance is topping them up once a month or so, and since access to our batteries is easy, this is a 10-minute job.
But moreover, our Exide batteries were purchased in India for less than £100 a battery. They've lasted 5 years so far, so that works out at about £80 a year on our batteries. To get the equivalent on lithium batteries, that's around 50 years to get the same cost advantage. Now, of course, lithium batteries are much quicker to charge, so you don't use so much energy to charge them up. But we have solar power, and of course we do run the engine when we're manoeuvring in tight spots and when there is no wind. So that advantage is almost nullified.
And the other problem, of course, with lithium is it's a fire risk, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's still issues with lithium batteries. They are becoming more popular, but one of the problems still with lithium batteries is fire.
So, Jamie, is there a conclusion to all of this, do you think?
Yes, well, I think there's a conclusion for our situation, which I hope we've neatly summed up for you. There is so much to take on board, and especially with the hybrid systems, you know, it's a very interesting proposition.
I think it's something we would really love to be able to do.
I think
really.
so.
What's the latest?
Well, the latest is we have been given a departure date from the UK. So the Beta engine, it's a Marinized Kubota engine, which is a Japanese tractor engine. It's made from off-the-shelf parts, but it's marinized in the UK. So hopefully it's going to be leaving the UK next month. Bear in mind, just as a reminder, this FTB Extra is recorded in real time. We're April now. Hopefully it's going to be leaving in May. And just a reminder, of course, that our sailing log is a little bit further behind. So when you next see our sailing update, we will be on the water without any of these issues because they are yet to happen.
Yes, it's the old engine, not the new engine. It'll be the old engine before it all went tits up.
Yes. It's also just quickly worth addressing that issue of different parts, and obviously with the Beta engine, I think everything's metric. The gearbox ratio is going to be different because it has to match the maximum revolutions of the engine. Bear in mind, of course, we have a max prop as well, so we have to consider these thoughts. But we've had a long chat with our mechanic. We've also chatted with Eddie, our agent, and even Beta themselves, and they're confident that what we have is a good fit. Of course, we've yet to fit it.
How can we move forward with this?
That's the last FTB Extra we'll be covering on the engine, but of course we will cover off the whole process, from engine failure to engine installation, and that's through our sailing logs, which come out every fortnight on YouTube. If you feel like you would like to support us, please consider joining us on Patreon, where we do post exclusive videos and we do keep people up to date in real time.
We the people have come to wave our flags for justice. Democracy must come if we are to rise as a nation.